I don't know about y'all, but I love learning new things, and the Newberry Library is a perfect place for your curiosity. Adult education has been a tradition at the Newberry since the 1890s. The classes are led by experts, and they're available in person and online. Take a writing workshop, study the history of flamenco, make your own book plate, and so much more. Register at newberry.org. Just click on Learn an Adult Education class to get started. Plus, enter promo code CityCast to get a 10% discount on your next class. That's CityCast, all one word. Today on CityCast Chicago, we continue to deal with the increased ICE presence across the city. We're discussing Illinois and Chicago's performance on the nation's report card, and Englewood's only fine dining restaurant is back open for business. All of that and more with our friends from Chalk Beach Chicago, Rima Amin, and the Chicago Tribune's Laura Rodriguez Presa. It's Friday, January 31st. I'm Jacoby Cochran, and this is what Chicago's talking about. We've got our friends in the building from Chalk Beach, Chicago, Rima Amin. Rima, welcome back to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
And from the Chicago Tribune, Laura Rodriguez Presa. Laura, welcome back.
Hi, Jacoby. Thanks again for inviting me on this show today.
If you're new to the podcast, you joined us on a busy ass week, my friends. Monday, we broke down some of the drama and alleged financial corruption going on in Dalton. Wednesday, we visited my mom's legendary basement bar. And Thursday, we gave one of the best guys to Chicago in February. And today, like every Friday, we've brought in some phenomenal Chicago voices to help us make sense of some of the biggest stories happening in the city this week. But first, given this is our final show of January, I want to look ahead with y'all a little bit. What is something you're really excited for in February? Laura, I'm going to start with you.
In light of all the the heavy work that's been going on, I think that what I'm looking forward the most in February is to seeing my grandparents that are coming back from Mexico. Hopefully it all goes well, and definitely the vision board. So my friends and I typically do a vision board event every year. This year we had to kind of slow it down for many reasons, but really looking forward to inject some positivity amidst all the mess.
Grandparents Vision Board. I love that. That's a beautiful start to the episode. Thank you so much for sharing. Rima, what about you? What's something you're looking forward to this month?
February is my birthday month, and so it's always a good excuse to see friends and hang out with family. And so I'm just looking forward to. I know this is Chicago, but I'm looking forward to starting to climb out of the dreariness of January. I'm sure I'll be disappointed fast enough, but yeah, just spending time with friends and family and getting a little bit closer to warmer weather.
Come on. Our executive producer, Simone Ali said, is celebrating a birthday over the weekend.
Yay.
Rima, when is your birthday in February?
My birthday is February 15th.
So we're going to give an early happy birthday to Rima. Something I'm looking forward to. Last month, we did an episode with our friend and family of the show, Dr. Eve Ewing, and we talked about some great books you can read this month and next to learn more about Chicago. But next month, I'm really excited to finish her book, Original Sins, which I have right in front of me right now. It's a book that I know she spent years and years and years working on. And so I'm going to try and not spend years and years and years to finish it. And so that's my goal for the end of February, is to knock this book off my list. But thank both of y'all for sharing so much. The big story this week in Chicago continues to be the increased ICE presence in the city. The Trump administration in less than 2 weeks has dismantled protections for immigrant communities, authorized arrests at schools, daycare facilities, hospitals, and places of worship, directed the Justice Department to essentially go after city leaders and welcoming cities, all the while live streaming this 24/7 fear-mongering campaign. Louder, you have been following this very closely across the Chicagoland area for weeks now, where an estimated over 400,000 plus people are living without quote unquote government authorization. Who are some of the families you spoke to this week? What are some of the stories you were following this week?
The fear has been existing now for a long time now, for a couple months. But it hadn't materialized until now. And we're seeing it in a different way than what people were expecting. So that's, I think, adds a lot more fear as well. So these targeted operations are taking place in many neighborhoods at the same time almost. And these families, right, many of them have been here decades. At least the ones I spoke to have not necessarily a serious crime background. So we're talking, right, just crossing, of course, illegally and having one or two DUIs, for example, right? Things like that. And we are seeing also people that are collateral arrests. So they don't have anything other than, of course, being in the country illegally, which is a civil crime, not necessarily, a felony or anything like that. And so a lot of these families are extremely fearful. It almost feels surreal. The very first family I spoke to, they were hiding in the attic when they saw the ICE agents outside, and they thought that they were going to go from door to door looking for people. So they hid in the attic until they saw that the agents were gone. Other families are hiding in the basement. People are not taking their kids to school. People are not going to work. So I think that we're really starting to see what this is going to be like. I think this is just the beginning. So while there are people that have warrants, that have convictions, that are quote unquote criminals, we're going to see a lot more that are not, that are going to be taken with.
Yeah, we even see officials who, for the last few months, have been pushing back against the forthcoming Trump administration, in some ways soften that rhetoric and use this very thin veil of criminality to try to assuage people's concerns this week. And I mean, you wrote a story about a family out in Elgin where throughout this week, we've seen local organizations, we've seen city agencies, we've seen advocates come out with these Know Your Rights campaign. But you wrote about a family out in Elgin who listened to those campaigns, right? Who said, hey, we asked for a warrant, but one was not presented to them. Can you tell us how that story went?
Yeah. So what happened there is that it was U.S. Marshals that were carrying out this operation. So the thing with that, and the thin line here, is that different agencies have different rights in how they operate. So in this case, because of the operation that they were carrying out, it was technically legal that they pushed themselves into the family's home, right?
And by push, you mean like use one of them metal batting rams and knock the door off.
Exactly. Right. Right. What they didn't know, or what we didn't know, and what is legal now, is that they were working hand in hand with ICE, right? Because of the new memo after Trump came in, agencies that have local offices, so DEA, FBI, U.S. Marshals, whatever, now they work with ICE, so they can be deputized as ICE agents.
But they also get to use the protections of their agencies to carry out illegal searches, illegal home invasions. Those become legal under the cover of these sister agencies, essentially.
Exactly. Right. That is what happened in that family's case. While they were looking for the stepson, he wasn't there, so they took the father instead and turned him into ICE. So, father has absolutely nothing to do with whatever the stepson was being looked for. I mean, and then in that video, you can hear, and we don't, the family was very smart to record this, right? But in that video, you could hear the agents say, we're looking for, and then she says the name of the person they're looking for. And then the daughter's responding, he's not here, he's not here. So then, they ended up taking their dad.
I mean, even as we started this call, you were talking about needing to go out back into the field because you heard of a larger operation. Because over the week, we hadn't really seen those major raids where mass arrests were happening, but it seems like those are picking up as well.
Yeah, it seems like the more power, or the different ways they're trying to find ways to get around, I guess, the education, right? Like people, Tom Homan said Chicago was very well educated. So I think they're finding ways to get to the immigrant community in different ways. So, again, we saw this in the 80s. This has happened before, and he's doing it again, and he promised it, and he's keeping his word.
Rima, I want to bring you in here because as I pictured young kids wondering what's going to happen with their parents, where they're going to go next. It's making me think about the piece you and our friend Sam Smiley dropped, which asked the question, how are Chicago schools responding to this increased enforcement? And you provided a few examples of some of the ways.
Yeah. So, I mean, one thing that just struck me about what you guys are talking about is what happens when a child's parents or guardian are detained by ICE. Where does that kid go? And, at the end of the school day. And that's one of many questions that it seems that Chicago Public Schools is trying to answer and is trying to prepare its schools to grapple with. And the piece that I wrote with my colleague Sammy kind of looks at what different school leaders and educators are doing in different communities. And some things are uniform, so CPS has trained their school principals on when do you let ICE into the school building. And by the way, in most instances, it's you don't, unless they have a criminal judicial warrant signed by a federal judge. They've trained them on, what are rights that families have and families who have varying immigration statuses. And so what we found in our report was, aside from this kind of like blanket training that CPS gives its principals, there are educators on the ground they're trying to strike this delicate balance in letting their families and students know that they know that this is scary, especially if you're worried about your immigration status, but that also they want to encourage them to come to school and that they're going to make school as safe of a place as possible. One of the stories in our article is about a mom who migrated from Venezuela a couple of years ago. She has temporary protected status, which is now up in the air because of some actions by the Trump administration. And she didn't send her son to school for a week. And there's so many stories like that out there. And it was eventually a Spanish-speaking teacher at her son's school who called after a few days. And even though the school had told them, it's safe, he sent her more information that she says that she didn't actually initially see or get. In another instance, we talked to a principal who himself was also a recipient of TPS after he left El Salvador due to a very devastating earthquake in the early 2000s, and was always worried about his work authorization status until literally last May, when he finally got a green card after being in the country for 24 years. And so he shares that story to say, believe me when I say I'm here with you. I understand. I literally understand where you're coming from. And we're not here to fuel panic. We're here to get you guys ready and to do things like give us emergency contacts, give us a phone tree so that if something does happen, that your kids are completely protected while they're in our hands. So yeah, it's just been very, very interesting to see how different school communities are trying to meet this very scary moment for so many CPS kids and their parents.
If you like me, then you're trying to get out and explore all of Chicago's museums in 2025. So add the Claremont Collections Automotive Museum to your list now. Low-key, it's Chicago's only automotive museum where you can learn about everything from horseless carriages to modern muscle cars. Plus, the vehicles regularly rotate, so you get a unique experience with each visit. They're also open for school field trips, and they have a private event space that seats up to 200 people. I'm talking birthdays, weddings, quinceañeras, and other special events. So take advantage of that free parking. Make 2025 extraordinary with 50% off annual memberships throughout February. Visit Wednesday through Sunday, 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. and discover over 300 vintage and classic vehicles at Chicago's most spectacular automotive museum. Experience the magic of Claremont Collections Automotive Museum whenever you want. Please don't let this opportunity slip away. Secure your discounted membership at ClaremontCollections.com today. Earlier this week, we got the results from the National Assessment of Educational Progress, or the NAEP scores, better known as the nation's report card. Rima, as a student who hated standardized tests and a professor who doesn't really put a lot of faith in grading, headlines like this sometimes I glaze over, but tell me more about the nation's report card and how Illinois and Chicago performed.
Yeah, absolutely. I hear you on that. I wasn't a big fan of these tests myself, and certainly, like any expert will tell you, that tests are not the only metric for student success, but they do give people a sense of where kids stand, especially post-pandemic. So, yeah, these are national tests that are given and reported out every 2 years. So the last time we got these were 2022. The news for Illinois and Chicago was generally good. The Chicago scores are still far below average scores for the state and the nation. But when it comes to reading and math, reading dipped slightly for the district. I believe it wasn't statistically significant, though. Math ticked a little bit up for Chicago. And then for eighth grade reading and math, both scores for Chicago went up, and that was the case for kids across Illinois in reading and math in fourth grade. There was a slight appearance of a dip, but again, NAEP says that the change was not statistically significant. So in some cases, basically these scores stayed the same as 2022, and then in some cases they actually went up.
Throughout time, these standardized scores have been attached to the amount of funding that schools or districts or state may receive. Is that the case still?
When I think about Chicago and Chicago's response, district leaders would tell you, oh, yeah, if we see any gains here, it's because we pumped a lot of money into classrooms. And there's some evidence for that. There was a Harvard and Stanford study conducted last year that found that Chicago's scores and recovery from the pandemic was actually outpacing most other big school districts across the country. And the district attributed that to the billions of dollars that they poured into extra tutoring, extra help for kids who were struggling in reading and math. And of course, they paid for that using federal COVID relief money that districts all across the country got. That money is kind of at the heart of the debate of the CPS drama we've seen over the past several months too, is, money, how to spend money. So lots of experts would say that investing more in extra help for kids could certainly be the reason why scores are coming up. And also, though, I think a good thing to remember is these scores are from 4 years after the pandemic first set in and schools were first shuttered. And there's been a considerable amount of work done on the city and state level to help kids come back. In some cases, these gains, kids are still not scoring the way that they did in 2019 before the pandemic hit. I think that's concerning to a lot of observers, but I think teachers and other educators would tell you that there's been a lot of good work done on the ground, and that the gains that we did see on this test are encouraging.
If you want to dive further into the numbers, please check out the link in our show notes. Every single episode of CityCast Chicago ends the same way, and that is with some good news. Lauda, I want to start with you. What is our good news for CityCast Chicago today?
I think the good news out of all of this is that the community has really remained resilient and strong. And these people, they left their country and in many cases walked miles, days, months to try to get here. And I think that for a lot of them, despite all the fear, they're still so willing to be strong and find ways to work around that fear. And, when I see them smile in the midst of so much pain, you are reminded that at the end of the day, humanity is stronger than anything else. And I think that, networks, community organizations are also more prepared than they were before. So just like we see the Trump administration ready to attack, we also see how some of those organizations are really, really pushing to help these communities and these people. So I think that, for many of them, there is hope in the midst of so much hate.
Rima, what is your good news for us today?
Okay, well, I really like Laura's good news. I do want to add before I share my good news that in the story that Sammy and I did, something that I was encouraged by was to hear when I talked to this mother who came from Venezuela, and she told me initially that she'd kept her son out of school. It felt like really good news to me that even though she's still so nervous about sending her child back to school, that there was a trusted adult at her kid's school that spoke her native language who was able to convince her to send her son back. And I took that as an indication that this family has built a line of trust with somebody at the school. That is so important for immigrant families, no matter where you're coming from, especially when there's a language barrier. And you don't hear about that all the time. So that was a real bright spot. And then on a personal note, I am closing on my very first apartment next week. I feel like a real adult. And the only way I could do that was with help from my parents. But the reason it's so exciting is because I'm really putting my roots down in Chicago after not living here for many years. So it's good to be home, and my mortgage is proof that I'm home for good.
Remember, we appreciate all of the work that you do, and we're so happy for you in this next journey. You ain't got to invite us to like the housewarming or nothing, but share some pictures or something. Share some pictures.
Hey, when I have disposable income again, I will invite you guys over for a party.
I am going to round out our good news today, and it's coming out of Englewood, where the restaurant Sakia is reopening after 5 years of being closed down, as all restaurants did during the pandemic at some point or another. They closed their doors, but they were never able to reopen. And what makes this especially beautiful, if you don't know, Sakia is run out of Kennedy King College with the school's culinary students. It's a fine dining place, meaning they got the white tablecloths, students rocking the all black with the red ties. I saw some steak frites, some shepherd's pie, creme brulee in the pictures. Shout out to Colin Boyle, and really a huge shout out to Atavia Reed, who we sat down with, I think early last year, to talk about how Englewood and the entire neighborhood and community was without a sit-down restaurant, and how devastating it had been to lose so many community staples. And to have this piece of good news with Sakia reopening 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. Tuesdays through Thursdays, which are their official class hours. They're hoping to open for extended hours soon. Neighbors can make a reservation by hitting up 773-602-5200. Again, shout out to everybody involved in Sakia's revitalization. I'm really excited to pull up on them. Please join me in giving another thank you to our guest today from Chalk Beach, Chicago, Rima Amin. Rima, we appreciate you.
Thank you so much. From
the Chicago Tribune, Laura Rodriguez Presa, thank you for making time for CityCast Chicago today.
Thank you guys for having me, and we'll be happy to continue talking about this as it develops.
Before we get out of here, I want to give a huge thanks to every single person who makes CityCast Chicago possible, including our executive producer, Simone Alisea, our producer, Michelle Navarro. The music we all love is from Sam Thousand, All the Kimonos, and Mark Greenberg from the Mayfair Workshop. And today, I want to give a very, 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 very special thank you to our senior newsletter editor, Sydney Madden, who has been bringing you the Hey Chicago newsletter for nearly 4 years. Sydney helped us build this podcast and this newsletter from the ground up, and today is her last day at CityCast Chicago. You might still see her name in your inboxes around the city, but Sydney, we are going to miss you a lot, my G. We appreciate you for creating this newsletter. Thank you for knowing literally everything that's happening in Chicago all the time and working so damn hard every single day to tell stories about every single neighborhood. We appreciate you. We're going to miss the hell out of you. And we wishing you all the luck in your next role. Obviously, this means we are hiring a new newsletter editor here at CityCast Chicago. Check the show notes for more information. In the meantime, in between time, we're going to be getting help from CityCast newsletter editor Ava Wanowski. So give her a warm welcome when you see her name in your inbox on Monday. Peace.